Dun, 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 dun. And now for something a little different. Woohoo!
It's the Freakacast.
It's the Freakacast.
But more specifically, a movie review.
Yay! Finally time for movie reviews. But this one is a little different because it's a movie that just came out.
Yes, so we're actually going to be a little current. It's been out for a little while now, and I'm going to...
It came out on the second weekend of May, May the 6th.
Yes.
We, of course, are talking about
Thor.
Thor! The Lord, God of Thunder and Lightning. And who also we get a day of the week from?
Really?
Yeah, Thursday. Came from Thor's Day. You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah.
I know nothing of this mythology, which is why some of these things are like, By the way, I'm Andrew Felson.
And I'm Matthew Puetz.
And as you've been hearing, this is the Freakacast. You can find us on the web at afelson1.wordpress.com. That's afelson1.wordpress.com.
Or on iTunes.
Or on iTunes. And search either under Andrew's Brain or the Freakacast.
Although if you actually go into Andrew's Brain, you might be a little scared.
I'm there. I'm scared, and it's my brain. There you go. We also have a Facebook page.
Yay! Freak Out Entertainment! Just keep in mind, this is the one with Freakazoid as the logo, not the other ones that we've apparently been finding.
Yes. So make sure to look on that, where you can post comments on both the Facebook page and the blog, because we want to hear from you guys. You can also see Matt's body of work for his costumes, fun stuff we post, and all that good stuff. But anyway, we don't want to waste too much time on all that, so we're going to go right into the movie review.
Yep. And this week we're going to be talking about Thor. Now this is a movie a character that neither Andrew or I were terribly familiar with. Yep. I was somewhat familiar with the Norse mythology, primarily from the movie The Mask, where the mask itself has those crazy effects on Jim Carrey's character, and it's from the god Loki, the trickster god of mischief.
Yes. And that's kind of where I, going into this movie, I knew the name Thor. I knew from as a character from the comics, just because I knew of it, and he was in the Avengers. I knew Odin, and I knew Loki. That was it.
That's pretty much all I knew, except I didn't know anything about the comics. I knew just from the actual Norse mythology. I keep wanting to say North mythology. I knew Odin was the father of the gods, and Thor was his son. I wasn't terribly familiar on Loki's place on it, but I was curious to see what it was going to be involved in and how it was going to play out in the movie.
And by the way, even though I mentioned I knew of them from the comics, I knew nothing about the characters whatsoever.
You just knew of them?
I just knew of them. I never read a Thor comic.
Yeah, me neither. So going into this, we were completely unaware of what we were about to see.
Which may have helped it.
Yeah, I think it did, because that way we don't have any kind of preconceived notions about how it should be done.
Yes.
That sort of thing. So, but anyway, let's talk about the brief rundown of the story. We start off...
By the way, spoilers, just in case.
We'll try to keep it not
We'll try to keep surprises free, but can't guarantee that there won't be any spoilers.
Yeah.
So, spoilers ahead.
Spoilers ahead. So, if you don't want to hear anything about the movie, we'll just turn it off and wait till next month or something, or whenever you see it. Anyway, so we start off on the realm of Asgard, which is the realm of the gods, if you will. And it is beautiful. The way that they just designed it was impressive. It looked like a complete fantasy setting, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
It was shiny.
It was very shiny, but it was not just the fact that it was shiny. It was very colorful too.
Yeah.
And considering that we start off on Asgard, and we kind of are introduced to Thor and Odin and Loki very early on, and we're introduced to the fact that Loki and Thor are brothers, and that Thor is kind of leading the way to taking the helm over from his father as the king of the gods at some point. And unfortunately, that during his ceremony, I guess almost his coronation, if you will, a couple of the ice giants, or the frost giants, or whatever they're called, bust in and try to take their power source back.
Well, the movie opens with Odin recounting his battle with the ice giants.
Yes.
And how he conquered them, took their source of power, I don't know what they called it in the movie.
They just called it a source of power, actually.
It looked like a big ice cube and it shoots ice.
Yeah. But it was kind of glowing at the same time.
And it was glowing and spiffy looking. He recounts that, and he also says that they saved the mortal realm from them.
Yes.
And that
would be us.
That would be us. And over time, the mortals have moved on. They forgot about them.
Right.
And we also
you stop
briefly
talking to them, and that's what happens when you stop talking to people. They forget about you.
Yes, and we also briefly see Thor and Loki as children because he's
Yes.
telling the story to them.
Which was kind of cool. It's kind of like he's telling it to us and them at the same time.
Yep.
Anyway, so once we get done with, back to the coronation. So during the coronation, a couple of the ice giants break into Asgard from their realm, Jotunheim, which is just fun to say. Jotunheim! Which, honestly, I wouldn't mind moving there. It's cold. And not sunny, which means I would be perfectly fine.
I would never visit you.
No, you wouldn't. But that's okay. I'd keep a warm blanket for you, though.
I would need several warm blankets. Like, I think since you were like, I need a Mr. Freeze suit, I would need a Mr. Hot suit.
Yes.
to be able to even go there. Hey, we're getting off track.
Here we are. That's okay. So the ice giants break in. They try to take their power source, and the guards that are there stop them. There's also this thing that's introduced called the Destroyer. Basically, it's kind of, I guess, a walking turret of power. It just shoots these beams out of its eyes.
Looks like a giant walking suit of armor.
Yeah, it's kind of cool looking. Anyway, its purpose is to basically destroy things that are trying to steal any kind of other relics from their little museum that they have in Asgard. And that sets up for future events. So during this, Thor decides, you know what? They busted in. They try to take her power. Guess what? I'm going to hit them back.
Even though my father said don't.
Yeah. Even though Dad says don't, the heck with him. I'm going to go do this on my own. Guess what? I'm going to bring my friends along too. So he does. Him and his friends, which we'll talk about in more depth in a minute, they go to Jotunheim to basically beat the crap out of the frost giants. And they do. Thor kicks some serious ass.
He does. Now, granted, I think the rest of them were like, let's just go in there and like try to sort things out because we want to know how did you do it, for one, because the way you travel through worlds, you have to do some kind of bridge work or something, and they didn't. I forget what the bridge is called.
The bridge is called the Bifrost.
The Bifrost. They didn't use the Bifrost. Like, how'd you do it? And don't do it again because we're supposed to be at peace.
Yeah.
And, of course, the thing is, like, if Thor starts wailing on them, the peace will be over, and there will be open war, which was what they wanted to avoid, even though Thor was all for war.
Yeah, because unfortunately, Thor's he's kind of when you first meet him, he is kind of your classic strong-willed, hot-headed, shoot first, ask questions later kind of guy.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing when you're about to be king and you have to deal with foreign policy.
Exactly. And so, naturally, they get into trouble.
Yes.
And Daddy has to come and save them.
Yes.
Good old Odin One-Eye.
One-eyed Odin.
The One-Eyed Odin.
And he's still awesome.
Yes, he is. But because of this, because Thor went against Odin, Thor ends up getting banished.
Yes.
And stripped of his power.
Yes, stripped of his power and banished to Earth, where he's picked up by Natalie Portman's character, Jane Foster. Foster. Who, her and her two compatriots are studying the stars, and they were expecting something to happen. Well, they got something that happened. They got the Bifrost coming in and planting Thor down on Earth.
Or they probably hit him with a car.
Yes. Repeated. And a taser.
And a taser. Odin also sends Thor's hammer to Earth.
Yes.
And basically the last scene in the movie of Iron Man 2 gets seen again.
Not the last scene in the movie, the last scene at the end of the credits.
Yes. Where the agent's like, sir, we found it. And they see the hammer on the ground where there's guys trying to pull it out because it's stuck and no one can lift it. So
once Thor's on Earth, he tries to fight. As soon as he finds out that his hammer's been there too, he tries to go and get it. Unfortunately, because he stripped of his power, he can't lift it.
Well, it's not so much that his power is gone, but it's the fact that because Odin told the hammer before he threw it to Earth that you had to be whoever
holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor.
And Thor was not worthy.
Right. He also didn't have his power. He wasn't strong enough, and he wasn't worthy enough to get the hammer out.
Well, in terms of that, I don't think pure strength would have mattered.
Oh no, I'm not saying it did, but I mean, even the humans couldn't lift it.
It's true.
So even if they were worthy, they wouldn't have been able to lift it without his power or his strength. If that makes any sense.
I think it's just one of those things where if you're not worthy, you can't lift it.
Okay. Anyway, so him and Jane Foster and her compatriots, they're trying to figure out who he is, where he's from. He's trying to explain to them, but they're not believing him because they think he's crazy.
And they have every right to think that,
right?
You know.
And while all this is going on, S.H.I.E.L.D. is, of course, made a base around the hammer.
And they're doing studies, and they're like, it's craziness.
And there is even a cool little cameo by Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Where he starts aiming at Thor while he's fighting this one guard. Of course, while he's battling, he's like, "Sir, are you going to call it? Because I'm starting to root for this guy." Which I thought was kind of cool. And then you also have, while Thor is in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s custody, you have Loki come down. We're not sure how. I think that's one interesting aspect of Loki's character, is he starts to play... Oh, I'm sorry, I completely forgot about that. While Thor is with Jane Foster and her friends, Loki is also... Or Odin has gone into what's called the Odin sleep. He's, I guess...
Like a coma?
Yeah. He's in kind of a coma. And so Loki decides, well, Odin's gone, Thor's gone, I'm going to be king.
Well, I mean, it's not so much he decided. I mean, that's his responsibility being Odin's son.
Yeah, he was also doing it to do it because that's what he wanted.
Well, of course. Because, he's Loki. Who we're not really shedding too much light on, because while Thor's on Earth, Loki's also having some storylines going.
Yeah,
at the same time.
And he's I mean, the interesting thing about Loki as a character was he starts off as Thor's brother, and he clearly cares about his brother, but he's also kind of jealous of him. Because Thor's always in the spotlight. He's got all the women. He's got all these friends. Loki's just kind of there, and nobody seems to pay a lot of attention to Loki. And so I think he takes this opportunity and uses it to his advantage to say, all right, my turn to be in the spotlight. So he kind of crowns himself king and starts making alliances and allegiances with the Frost Giants.
As well as upholding his father's banishment of Thor, even though his friend's like, oh, bring him back, you're king now. And he's like, no.
No, but I think he was partially doing that. I think that was a double thing. He was doing that to not only keep his reign as king, even though it was his role, but also because he could.
Yes.
So we start to see the evil side of Loki.
Yes. Well, I mean, plus, we know Loki is the trickster god and he's a liar. I mean, even before we find out, like, his friends find out he's evil, he's a liar. They all know he's a liar.
Yeah.
Like, he comes to Earth and tells Thor that Odin is dead.
Right.
And not in the sleep.
And that they don't want him back.
Right. And so Thor, upon hearing this, is now devastated and has just decided to, okay, well, if I'm here and I can't lift my own hammer, then I guess I have to live the rest of my life as a mortal and be with them. And so he tries to make the effort to adapt.
Which he does quite well, actually.
Well, briefly.
Well, I mean, he's not there for long, but while the time he's there, I mean, he goes out and has a couple drinks with that one guy, and they end up having a good time. So it's like he clearly adapts.
Yes. And then right after that, his friends come and say, hey, we're going to take you back.
Yes.
And that's when Loki starts sending things down.
And that's when Loki decides to send the Destroyer down to kill Thor.
Yep. And that's when things get real.
Yes. Because I think that scene kind of helped bring the characters to fruition, because in that scene, Thor decides that even without his powers, he's still going to make an effort to stop the Destroyer from hurting other people.
Right.
And that's when he becomes worthy. And the cool thing about that was he didn't have to run over and grab the hammer, but the hammer came to him in a really cool shot.
And so with Earth taken care of, they return to
Asgard.
I keep wanting to say Isengard, which I know is not the same thing.
Wrong movie.
Wrong movie. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard. Okay. Sorry, had to get that out of my system. So they return to Asgard, where they have to confront Loki.
Yes. But see, he's also got the Frost Giants on his side now, too.
Kinda.
He's
deceiving them, too.
Yes. He's deceiving everybody.
Mm-hmm. Because he wants to make himself look good.
Yes.
And they battle it out there.
And then we have a very, very emotional brother fight. Because all while, this is going on, you do have an established and a developed relationship with Thor and Loki. And so as Loki's becoming more deceptive and more evil, Thor's becoming more heroic. So, you start off on the way they were before, and they start to split. And, you feel for them. That they don't necessarily... Thor doesn't want to fight his brother, but he has to.
And even after he wins, and they think Loki is gone because he falls off the road.
Yes.
And, he must be dead. He grieves for his brother, so he's not happy that he won in that way.
It's like he's happy that he was able to save Asgard, but he's not happy of what he had to do in order to do it.
Right.
So, there's definitely a human side of Thor, and that's one thing that makes the character interesting and relatable. How do you make a god relatable? Well, you give him human emotions, and I think they did that really well.
All right, and I think I don't want to go too much more into the story, so let's talk about some of the characters, shall we?
Yes. First off, we have Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth, and the only thing that he's done that any of us would know of, Jim Kirk's dad in the new Star Trek film. Granted, he was only on screen for like 10 minutes.
But apparently that was enough to...
That was enough for them to be like, yeah. And even in that 10 minutes, people do remember that character. Even when it's just a short bit. And with all the characters you have in the movie, we can say, well, I at least remember the look. I remember, him, basically crashing his ship into the other ship and saving the people. Shoot, when you've got a limited bit of screen time and you can do a lot with it, that's pretty good. So Andrew, what did you think of Chris's take on Thor? As far as how he presented the character to you and that sort of thing.
I think he played it as well as he could.
Okay.
I have gripes with some of the character development. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the overall flow and story of it.
Okay.
But as far as his acting and abilities to portray the character, I think he did fine.
Yes. And obviously the guy's ripped like crazy, which draws female moviegoers to the screen. So he's got that going for him as well. Next up, we have Odin, played by the infamous and famous Anthony Hopkins. And I shouldn't have to tell you who this guy is.
No, not at all.
In fact, on my notes, I just have that he's noted for awesomeness.
Probably his most famous role would be Dr. Hannibal Lecter.
But he's done a lot of other things.
But he's in so much stuff, and awesome voice.
I think, it's one of those things, we said one day, he could talk about Beanie Babies and it would be awesome.
Yep, and we would all be rushing out to buy Beanie Babies because Anthony Hopkins told us to.
Yes. All right, next up we have Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston. And he's mostly been on TV. There wasn't any TV shows that I was terribly familiar with when I looked on, but he's done a lot of TV roles, and that's fairly common for actors nowadays just because they can do more of them. It fits within their schedule. It's more consistent work. As you and I know, having a constant paycheck's always a nice thing.
Yes.
So I'm sure the same is true for actors. And next, we have Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman. And we know who she is.
Yep. Good to look at.
Yes.
But not to take away from her acting ability.
No,
she did do.
In fact, she just
job.
recently won an Oscar for her role in Black Swan.
Oh yeah,
so
she did.
So I have yet to see that movie. I'm curious to see it. And it's interesting because having effectively seen her kind of grow up in her acting career all the way back. What's the Tim Burton movie with the aliens? Mars Attacks. Seeing her as early as Mars Attacks and then through all the Star Wars movies, and then what was she in recently? There was a couple movies she done since then, and now to see her in Thor, even though it was a comic book movie, I felt like she still, she grew. I saw her much more mature acting, had, it was more there than what I had seen previously, so I enjoyed that.
And by the way, since we skipped over poor old Loki, I liked his character quite a bit too.
Okay.
So it's he played Loki and he's on TV. Over. It's but I liked him.
I like the character too. It's I'll get to a little later, but I thoroughly enjoyed his costume actually a little bit more than Thor's. It just had more going on with it. Plus it was green and I like green. All right, so now let's talk about the few members of the supporting cast because, you got your main cast, but sometimes those supporting characters are kind of interesting too. I put this guy at the top mainly just because I like his name the most, Heimdall.
Okay.
For some reason, Heimdall. He is the gatekeeper.
Yeah,
where the keymaster is, we don't know.
Some other area.
Yes. But he's that big guy with the ginormous horns on his helmet. And he uses the sword to open the Bifrost gate.
And he can see far away. He can see other great distances to other realms.
Yes. His name. He was played by a guy named Idris Elba. And he's most noted for, he was in 28 Weeks Later and the movie called The Losers, which was kind of an action comedy.
Okay, I don't think I've seen either or.
I haven't either, but those are the only two that I found that were of any note. Then we have Sif, who was the girl warrior.
Okay.
She was played by a woman named Jamie Alexander, and she's most, kind of going along with the theme of Loki, she's most noted for TV roles.
Okay.
Most notably CSI Miami and the show called Nurse Jackie. So I didn't see many movie up there, at least nothing that I had seen. And then we also have, and then I'm about to get to what's called the Warriors 3. And those are his 3 main guy friends. You have the one guy, Volstagg, who was the redheaded guy. Kind of reminded you of Eric the Red, you said?
Yeah.
Ate a lot.
Ate a lot.
He was played by Ray Stevenson. And he's a big action guy. He's done primarily action films. He played Frank Castle in the newest Punisher movie, Punisher Warzone.
Okay.
Well, granted, I didn't care for the movie, but he was kind of a cool. He looked the part. He looked the part. He worked well with the part. For a movie that's nothing but a guy killing people, he played it well. And he was also one of the knights in the movie King Arthur, which was back in early 2000s. It was kind of a reimagining. It was kind of like a more historically accurate portrayal of King Arthur. It was more on the Roman Empire side. And that was a good movie. But if you need a big guy as a sidekick action movie star, he's your go-to guy.
It's also nice that Marvel's reusing some of their actors.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because between him and Chris Evans and Ryan Reynolds, it's like eventually we're gonna get to the point. Well, we only need 4 people to play every character on screen. And then we have let's make sure I'm saying this right. Fandral. This was the blonde-haired guy with the beard.
Okay, the guy who kind of looked like a fencer.
Yeah, well, I liked him because, he had a sword, which is kind of neat. And this was played by a guy named Josh Dallas. And he's also noted for a lot of TV roles. He was in the newest version, thank you, of Doctor Who. And he was also in the newest version of Hawaii Five-0. And I liked his character just because, even though he wasn't on screen for much, it looked like the character had fun fighting. Like he was taking a lot of.
Well, they were all warriors, so that was their.
Yeah, but I just remember, when I watched him, it was like, wow, he seems to have a smile on his face every time he's fighting a guy.
Because he fights with flair.
Yeah, he does. He had fun with it, and that just kind of helped for me separate the characters out a little bit more. Because you've got all these characters on screen, they're not on screen for very much time, so I thought they really did a lot with taking the little bit of time they had and making it worthwhile. Mm-hmm. And then we also have the last of the Warriors 3, Hogun, which obviously,
Hogun!
And I hope I'm saying this right, Tadanobu Asano.
We'll just assume that's right.
We'll just assume that's right. He's mostly been in foreign films, although one that I thought I can't not mention this.
All right.
Apparently, because movie studios have these weird ideas, they're making, and I kid you not, a Battleship movie based on the game. And this guy is going to be in it.
Oh, boy.
Because, I found it on IMDb, and it just says, a fleet of ships encounters an unknown fleet of ships.
A battle ensues.
Yes. And it's like, really?
On one hand,
I remember hearing this as a joke rumor a while back, and I'm reading this and I'm like, they're actually doing this. Okay.
Well, didn't we just see, we also just saw Pirates, the new Pirates movie, and we saw a preview for, I don't remember what the movie's called, but it's essentially Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yeah.
The movie.
I've seen a fan trailer done of Tetris, and that at least looked cool.
And so really it's like, okay, so they're going to be they've already done Clue, so that's not new. So are we doing Chutes and Ladders next? Perhaps the Game of Life. Maybe Monopoly.
Maybe in a Monopoly. Although if it's a 4-hour movie that never ends, I'll get tired of it.
You could always say Willy Wonka was Candyland, but
So anyway, but that wraps up all the Asgard people. And then we have, moving back to Earth, we have Eric Selvig, who is the guy that Jane Foster works with, kind of her father figure.
Okay.
He worked with her father, if you remember.
Yeah.
That was played by a guy named Stellan Skarsgård. And I found this rather interesting. Speaking of pirates, he played Bootstrap Bill.
Okay, cool.
I was like, wow, there's no way you could tell because he's done up in makeup for the movie.
Yes.
It was kind of cool.
Plus the period clothing and all that.
Yeah. Plus he's got all those barnacles on his face and everything. It was kind of hard to tell. But that was kind of cool that, it was something that I had seen before I knew this actor from something. Because he seemed like such an unknown at first. And then we have Darcy Lewis, the kind of giddy
She's the
comedy.
intern.
Yeah, the intern, if you will. Played by Kat Dennings. And she's noted for... The only 2 films I could find of note were The 40-Year-Old Virgin. I don't really remember her part too much. And then she was in this other movie called Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, starring Michael Cera, Scott Pilgrim.
Okay.
Anyway, that kind of wraps up the main and supporting cast in their parts. Two other things of note, people involved with the movie that I thought, are really worth mentioning are the director, Kenneth Branagh. And you take it, basically the way we've kind of described Thor, he goes against Odin's word in the beginning. Odin banishes him. While that's, to Earth, he's stripped of his power. While that's going on, Loki's taking control of the throne, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Thor kind of gets his act together, comes back, takes on Loki. Well, considering that is actually very similar to the story of Hamlet, it makes sense that you'd get a guy who is noted for playing Henry V and Hamlet to direct this film. In fact, that's one of the things that drew him to the story and the character, was that it had a Shakespearean kind of angle to it. And I think he brought that, and I think that's one thing that really helps set apart Thor from other comic book movies, is it has a story that's very old-fashioned. It's a classic story.
Yes.
And we've seen a similar, if you recall, The Lion King actually had a similar storyline to it. Obviously done differently.
Obviously.
And handled differently, but the same basic storyline is there. Mm-hmm. And so I think, to have that storyline, I thought was a good way to play it out. I think it certainly made the characters worthwhile. To take it, like I said before, how do you make gods, interesting and relatable? And I think by taking that storyline and using that, which from what I understand is from the comics, mm-hmm. And so it's not like it's against the source material, but I think that was the good way to go. And so clearly you want a guy who has the resume, so he understands the storyline aspect and how to work with that and this sort of thing. And the only other movie I could think of that he was really known for was he played Victor Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein back in the 90s.
All right, cool.
That was an interesting movie with Robert De Niro as the creature. And then we also have the costume designer, because me as a costume person, obviously I'm going to have something to say on this, but the costumes in this movie were just phenomenal. Especially, well, at least for Asgard. Obviously when they're on Earth, they're wearing regular clothes.
Right.
But when they're, it's just the way that they were designed, it was really a nice combination of technology and fantasy. It looked like it didn't belong anywhere except for there, but it could belong anywhere at the same time, if that makes any sense.
Maybe.
Okay. It was one of those things where, seeing all the different characters in their different costumes, I just thoroughly enjoyed the not just the aesthetics of the look of Asgard, but the way that the costumes were done, the use of the different fabrics, and, obviously for the costume purposes, most of the helmets and armor was plastic, but it looked metal. It looked like it could have been made from some unknown material. Mm-hmm. So it had a good otherworldly look to it, while at the same time still being really cool and clearly armor and that sort of thing.
Right.
But not too technological. It's not like it was Stormtrooper armor and that sort of thing.
Right. And who did the costumes?
Oh, I'm sorry. The costume designer was a woman named Alexandra Byrne. And, kind of like Kenneth Branagh, she's got a resume that includes Hamlet and Elizabeth the Golden Age. So she clearly understands how to do period clothing and that sort of thing. And with a place like Asgard, it really has more of a period look to it than it does modern and more science fiction.
Right.
And so I think that's the angle you want to go with it, is get somebody who's got the experience with period looks. Mm-hmm. And so that was pretty cool. I think I could just watch a movie about Asgard, and I'd be good. I'm like, that was awesome.
She'd be like, I would really like a reality TV show based in Asgard.
That would be awesome.
Like the Asgardian police.
Asgard Shore.
Yeah. This is where all the jerks in Asgard live, on the shore.
With Thor the early years.
Him just pumping weights on the beach.
That'd be awesome.
While Loki's in the arcade.
I could totally see that.
And he's got a quarter on a string to keep cheating the game.
Yes. Or no, he just magically creates the image of a coin that he uses for something. So, overall, Andrew, what did you think of the film?
I thought it was okay.
Okay. Please elaborate.
Okay. I thought it was okay. Oh, that's going longer. Never mind.
Stab.
My take on the movie in terms of why I thought it was just okay was I felt that certain characters weren't fully developed properly.
Which ones?
Thor, actually.
Really? Okay.
I just didn't buy it. His change of heart.
Okay.
Because he went throughout most of the movie. On one hand, the movie did flow quite nicely, so it didn't seem all that long.
Right.
Which maybe why I don't feel that they did as good a job with Thor as they could have was, he went, he was acting brash. He's like, oh, I'm the god of thunder. You don't believe me, I don't care, because I know I'm right. Which is fine.
Yeah.
But he's had this attitude of, I can do anything. I'm banished. I don't care. I'm going to get my hammer and all will be good. Oh, you mortals, you cannot do all this to me. And granted, I'm hyping that up, but still.
Right.
He had that kind of attitude, and when he tries to get the hammer, but fails, and Loki tells him his father dies, and he's crushed. That was okay, but then, the very next day, he's making eggs, and then while he's making eggs, his friends show up and say, oh, we're come to bring you back. He's like, no, I have changed. I will stay here and save them.
So you felt the change was a little too fast.
Yeah, overnight, really, dude? And now you're going to sacrifice yourself, so all of a sudden, overnight, you're worthy? No. I think they should have dwelled more on the fact that you need to really change, because I didn't buy the change.
So you felt it should have been taken a little bit more slowly.
I feel that, yes, to develop the fact that... a little bit
more of a development with the change.
Yeah, plus, the fact that, they have a love story, what's her name?
Jane.
He and Jane fall in love. And, he loves her, she loves him. And it happens in the span of, a day, it feels like.
Well, see, I never really felt like they fell in love.
Well, they kissed, and he's she wants to get to find him because he can't return to Earth right away. Spoiler. And he wants to go back to Earth for her because, he loves her. But it's they had very little chemistry. He spent one night with her showing, drawing pictures on her map about space and describing Asgard. And while that's romantic and all, not enough.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, I guess it didn't bother me as much because, I don't know, I guess, from Jane's perspective, she was clearly the giddy, love-struck schoolgirl. And so I think that's why I completely bought her infatuation with Thor. To me, it's she's incredibly just infatuated with him from the get-go. At least that's how I saw it.
I don't know. Considering, for the most part, for the beginning, I thought...
And he's Thor. He can get any woman he wants. And, he's got this girl here who he's infatuated with. And he also he makes a mention of how he likes the fact that she's very smart and intelligent, especially for a human. Mm-hmm. And so she does kind of stand out to him in that respect. And the fact that she's got these theories about the Bifrost, or, she doesn't call it a Bifrost, but she thinks of it more like a wormhole.
Yeah, they throw in, an Einstein theory, which I can't remember the name of.
Yeah, I can't remember it either. But
essentially,
I would agree. I would agree that I do think they could have taken a little bit more time with the development of the change of him going from that headstrong, I'm right, you're wrong, shoot first, ask questions later attitude to the, okay, I've got it, what do I need to do in order to get my life straightened out? Now,
to be more humble, to be more, okay,
right.
I've more to learn, because he says that to his father at the end, I have more to learn.
Right. Now, I do think that, in the moment where he couldn't get the hammer, maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was the fact that it was happening to him and it wasn't demonstrated to us as much as we thought it should.
Well, he was defeated, but it just, again, had they spent a little bit more time developing his turnaround of character, I would have bought it a little more.
It would have been a better payoff for you.
Yeah, granted, I still liked him as, an overall character, but I just felt that certain parts of it just weren't done as well. On the other hand, I thought they did a phenomenal job with Loki, where I'm like, I like Loki way better than I do with Thor. I feel for the guy.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, and... maybe it's because he had, I don't know, he had about the same screen time, I don't know. Who knows? But, now that I think about it, I think they did more scenes with Loki, and just... Because maybe it's because he didn't have as much of a turnaround to have happen.
Well, I think it's more of they helped us really reveal the mindset of him.
Yeah.
And he does actually go through somewhat of a change where he goes from just like a trickster to I'm going to...
Oh, yeah.
Borderline...
He goes through a change.
Borderline bad, but he goes from bad to worse. He has a self-discovery moment, which I won't reveal.
Yeah.
Granted, it's in the comics, as I found out, but I won't reveal it anyway.
Right. No, but I see what you're saying. I'm just saying, because Thor had to go from basically make a 180... Loki, didn't make as much of a change.
No, he just went further down the path he was already heading.
Right.
But also to me, there were just parts of his personality and the way things he was feeling that identify easier.
Yeah.
Not so much personally relate to.
Right.
But it's like I can understand his character
it
better.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, in terms of like how he felt he was going to be forever overshadowed by his brother because he wasn't he wasn't big, he wasn't super strong. He always felt like he was the lesser brother.
Cool ninja moves.
He did. He's
able to project an image of himself. That's pretty cool.
he ends up being like one of their best sorcerers.
Yeah.
But he had that feeling of inadequacy.
Yeah.
He had that feeling of, and also the fact like he felt that his parents loved Thor more than they loved him, not equally.
Which
And
is interesting because in the scenes where it's just him and his mother talking, who was played by Renee Russo, I don't know the character's name.
I don't know.
Was played by Renee, but anyway, you really felt like he did at least care for his parents.
He was a complex character. I ended up liking his portrayal. I ended up liking Loki in the film. Granted, he's the villain a bit more than Thor.
That's okay. It's okay to like the villain.
I know. So, I mean, as far as the rest of them, like the warriors and the humans, some of the roles were so small, like they were just blips.
Yeah,
like,
so you didn't really have time to get to know them.
Right. So overall, like I feel that the movie was okay. Like Matt was saying, the visuals and the costumes were really great to look at, and like the fight scenes they had were really great. But some of the character development I felt was a little weak.
Okay.
So that's kind of my take. I liked watching Pirates more than I liked Thor.
Well, I can see it, especially since with Pirates you already know half the cast.
Granted, they had 4 movies already, like 3 movies heading to this one.
So it's well, I'm just saying it makes it a little easier to make that transition when you already know a lot of the characters. See, with Thor, we didn't know any of the characters.
No.
So it's harder for us to jump in and really grab hold of a lot of these characters. I mean, even I would kind of agree. I think I enjoyed Loki's character more so than Thor's. Doesn't mean I didn't like Thor's character.
No, and to be honest, like it's one of those things where when Thor gets banished, it's one of those things where even if Loki had a hand in it, Loki was right. Like if Thor was king, at that time, he would have been a terrible king.
Yeah.
Because he was headstrong, he was rash, he was brash, did whatever he wanted, didn't care about the consequences, where Loki's like, you should really think some of this stuff through.
And I think that's what made Loki such an interesting... you really can't call him a villain.
Not yet, anyway.
Because he's... Yeah, not yet anyway, because he's not evil. He was actually trying to help his brother out.
Yeah.
To some extent. It's like he's just smacking him upside the head saying, hey, stop doing that. You're screwing this up. Stop it. Okay, fine.
Granted, I did ruin your big day.
Yeah.
And I did...
Granted, I did call Dad over here.
So I did cause some grief to you, and to be honest, I kind of saved our kingdom some trouble in the long term because you would have started war with them anyway, probably.
Yeah.
Because all you do is go out and fight. Because you have a warrior mentality, not a king mentality. And even Dad agrees. Right, Dad? Right.
So it's interesting because, Loki was a more interesting villain. More interesting character. But, I think that's what it was, is with Thor, I think, being introduced to him the way he was such a shallow, maybe that's just it. I mean, maybe because we've never been that kind of person. Maybe we don't understand what kind of change it takes,
To go from shallow to not so shallow?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. It's like, neither one of us is ever been a shallow person.
No.
So we don't really, maybe it doesn't take much to make a person change like that.
I guess. So what was your
Maybe
overall...
it just takes Natalie Portman. Who knows?
Maybe. I would change for Natalie Portman.
I think we all would.
Change my pants.
Change your shoes, change your hairstyle.
Yeah.
Change your mind? I don't know. Maybe.
I might. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. Who knows? Anyway. Matt,
my take on Thor?
Yeah, overall.
Well, overall, I enjoyed it immensely. And what I enjoyed about it, obviously, like I said before, the visuals were great. But from a story aspect, I really, really enjoyed the story. I think that's just, like I said before, it's a classic Shakespearean story. And I think that's what gravitated me towards it. You have the headstrong Thor being banished because he was an idiot and went off and fought the ice giants without permission against Odin, nonetheless. And he has to go through change. Now, granted, as we said before, the change could have been developed a little better, but the change still happened. And while that's going on, you have Loki taking the role of king and kind of doing his own trickery against the ice giants and everybody. And then you have the clash at the end. And for me, that's just, I don't know. Like, I've never seen a story like that been handled on a comic book level. Certainly not on a big budget level. Certainly not with the kind of star power you have. So for me, it was a combination of the story and the visuals, and for the most part, unless it's a character I really gravitate towards, I just kind of go with it. Like, I've never really been bothered by a character that much.
I'm not bothered by it.
I'm not saying you were. I'm just saying from my own perspective, it's like I don't dwell quite so much on, well, they didn't do that character as well, or I didn't like that character. And it's just like, okay, the character's there. I'm just going to go with it. Because if I can appreciate the overall story, then I'm going to appreciate the movie no matter what. That's usually what it is for me. It's like, if I can't appreciate the story, I'm not going to appreciate the movie.
Okay.
Because you can have good characters, but a bland story. And then it's kind of like, okay, well, the characters are good, but there really wasn't much story there, so I'm kind of eh. But in Thor's case, like, okay, some of the, so some of the characters can develop more of that's okay, but it had a really strong story to it, a really good story, and I really gravitated towards that. And that's kind of where my anchor is.
Okay, I mean,
that makes sense.
It works both ways, where sometimes you can have a great story and weaker characters, and sometimes you can have really great characters and not as good a story, because sometimes the story itself is the characters.
Yeah.
Where it's a character-driven story instead of a story-driven with characters.
Right. But I mean, I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying that's where I gravitate towards.
I understand. I see what you're saying. I mean, and I'm not dissing the story. I think like the fact that they were able to pull like a Hamlet type deal, like a Shakespearean superhero movie, was a good thing on their part.
And that's the other thing I wouldn't call Thor a superhero.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. And I think that's why, because at least in this film, it was very little of it took place on Earth. You know, it wasn't really meant for Thor's debut on Earth. It was meant of Thor's story regarding Asgard. I don't see this movie as a superhero movie. I see obviously it's a comic book movie. Mm-hmm. And obviously we will see him on Earth in a superhero role in the Avengers next summer. Yeah. Yay! We're going to an awesome summer next year.
Yep.
By the way, there's a picture of Bane on Freakout. Go look at it.
Granted, it's only his back and kind of a little bit of his head, but he's wearing a mask.
That's not a leather mask.
That's okay.
I'm just saying it's not exactly like the comics, but it's still clearly Bane. Anyway, we're getting off topic. What was I talking about?
You wouldn't call it a superhero movie.
Oh, okay. So I wouldn't call it a super movie, but that's because his origin of how he became, the hero he is not your typical superhero story.
No.
And so I like that. It's unique enough where it can stand on its own. It's not really a super movie, but it's still a comic book movie, and you still have all the elements there that make it a good, watchable, enjoyable movie. But at the same time, it's its own thing. Even in the comic book realm, it's its own thing. You know, you don't see a lot of that uniqueness too often.
Right. Well, also at the same time be connected, since it's in the same, obviously because they're going to do the Avengers, but it's the same universe as Iron Man
and Hulk.
They even mentioned Stark's name.
And they also mentioned the scientist who is the leader in gamma radiation.
Yeah, so
clearly talking about Bruce Banner.
Clearly talking about Hulk. So,
and I don't think I didn't recall a Captain America reference in Thor.
No, but they might. I mean, they'll tie it in somehow.
Yeah.
So overall, I'd say it was a good movie. Certainly watchable.
So,
Was it the best Marvel's done?
I mean,
no, I don't think so. I think some have been better, but not their worst by far.
No, certainly not
nowhere near worse, I would say.
Yeah, nowhere near worse. Certainly better than the original Thor they had many years ago, where they actually had a Hulk and Thor movie, and it was just I don't even know where to begin on the crap.
I do find it funny that, like, I think someone on the internet, people like on the internet were like, we want to see Thor in the funny hat with wings, and some of the movie was like, we don't want Thor in the funny hat with wings. It doesn't make sense because he's not really Thor for most of the movie. You know, he's Thor, yes, but he's not flying around, zip around.
Well, that's the thing. You know, that just
so, in the beginning, he briefly is wearing the helmet. He's wearing a helmet
because it's a ceremonial helmet. If you notice in the movie, they only wear their helmets when it's necessary. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, look, just because a character looks a certain way in the comic books doesn't mean that's how it should look in the movie. I don't want to see a live-action Batman wearing tights. It doesn't make sense.
Right. Although I will say, like, I did think Loki's helmet was pretty cool.
Yeah, Loki's helmet was pretty cool. And I like Heimdall's helmet, too. It just looked, that was the thing, is, like, I gravitated towards certain characters. Hell, I even like the guards' costumes that they were wearing. I just thought the costumes overall, it's like, I wish I could get at that level where I could make that.
Maybe one day.
I think that's my eventual goal, is if I could make a Thor, not Thor character costume, but that era, that...
Like a suit of armor.
Yeah, like an Asgardian warrior look. I think that would... I'd be like, okay, I've reached that level of awesomeness. I have some credibility to myself now.
I'll give you some rare candy. Maybe you can level up.
I think it would take a lot of that.
I'll stock up on rare candy, although it is rare.
Because I think I'm only at like a level 5 right now. I'd have to get to like level 50. So
That's a long time to evolve.
yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. We need a lot of that.
So any more you want to add to Thor?
I'm looking forward to his return. I'm looking forward to seeing, just character-wise, how he's going to interact with Tony Stark.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be interesting.
It's one of those things like we don't think about it when we watch the movie. It's like, we're gonna see him have to interact with Tony Stark. And while Tony Stark, is cool and he's a ladies' man, it's like he doesn't have the body of Thor, so
No, and I'm sure.
he might get a little jealous of Thor getting all the ladies.
He's like, I need to start pumping weights. You got a suit. I don't care. Plus, I mean, I'm sure when Thor first shows up and he starts talking the way he does, I'm sure Tony Stark's gonna be like, "Who is this guy?"
Yeah, I'm sure he will. And that's what I look forward to the Avengers. Is like I know very little about the Avengers, but just knowing the character of Tony Stark, knowing the character of Thor, knowing the character of Bruce Banner, and then we'll get to know the character of Captain America later this summer.
And Nick Fury.
And Nick Fury. Yeah, we get freaking Sam Jackson in there. That's awesome.
It is. I'm looking forward to it.
So, I mean, you're going to have all these heavy-hitter, great characters and great guys that we know, and it's like, just to watch them interact. I mean, it could be just them sitting at a bar, and it'd be awesome. I don't need action scenes. Just show me these guys at a bar.
That's crazy.
Seriously, it could be like a bar scene, and that's all the Avengers would be, and I'd be awesome. I'd be like, this is awesome.
Well, thankfully, I'm sure they'll be doing more than just that.
Well, I'm sure they will.
But overall,
that's how the bar. Well, you'd have a bar fight. Bruce would be sitting there knocking a couple back, trying to keep his level down. All of a sudden, some random guy punches him or knocks him over, and he gets angry. So he hulks out and starts wailing at him. Tony and Cap look at each other like, "Oh, great! All right, come on, guys, let's take care of this."
I was like, "Wait a minute, we have a guy with a giant hammer. Thor, you take care of it. I'm gonna keep drinking."
Well, he's got 2 women on his arms.
Yeah. And Loki's the bartender.
Just drink. I like it. Smash. Bring me another.
And Loki's a bartender. Spiking people's drinks.
That's how it'd be out. There you go. That's the Avengers. Sorry we spoiled it for you.
The Avengers in the bar. The Avengers after hours.
Actually,
happy hour.
Actually, let's just go ahead and plug the I'm a Marvel, I'm a DC on YouTube.
Which they already do that.
Do that. But you know what? Maybe he'll hear this and get an idea for next year's parody.
Anyway, parting thoughts on Thor. Definitely a must-see, I would say.
Yes.
Go out and watch it. Oh, one thing I do want to mention before we close out. And it doesn't relate so much to Thor as it does movie watching overall. We saw Thor in 3D.
Oh yeah, don't waste your money on 3D.
Don't waste your money on 3D because I'll be honest with you folks, this was my first time seeing a current 3D movie. I've seen 3D movies in the past where like you just get a pair of glasses at home and stuff flies out at you from the TV.
Yeah.
But this was the first time I went to a theaters with the new technology. Like I didn't bother to go see Avatar and stuff like that. And I was not impressed. Because it just didn't, there was no point to it.
It didn't fly out at you. I mean, the most it did was add an extra depth of field, and it's like, well,
but I don't care about that.
Yeah. I want stuff to fly out at me.
If I'm going to pay extra money with a pair of glasses on my face, which made my eyes tired, now I want it to be worth it.
I want to kind of dovetail on this. While this doesn't have so much to do with Thor, but it does kind of talk about the 3D. They just reopened the new Star Tours ride at Disney World, where the Star Wars ride, and it's completely different from what it was, basically. I mean, it's the same idea, but they've incorporated elements from the prequels. It's now in 3D, and they say the 3D aspect is done well, where it's not too much, but it's not too little. It's just enough stuff does fly out at you. I was reading, I forget who was it wrote the review, but they're like, yeah, at one point I actually ducked. And I'm like, awesome. If you're ducking out of a 3D effect in a Star Wars ride, that means that next year when they do the episode 1 in 3D, we're going to get that effect. Because it's like, let's face it, regardless of what your impressions of the prequels, visually they're great, and you know that when Lucasfilm takes on an undertaking such as that, they're going to do it right. So they're going to take advantage of the fact that if it's 3D, stuff's going to fly out at you.
I would hope so. And I mean, it's
not just going to be depth of field like you saw in Thor.
And the thing is, I'm not asking for things to be like constantly jumping out at me every 2 seconds.
No.
But it's like I would want them to at least.
But when the hammer's being thrown, how is it being thrown at my face?
Yeah, like
how much was that?
So the idea
And
of
like kind of with pirates, the couple shots where they have the sword pointed at the screen.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the preview, and when she puts the sword through the door and it comes out at you.
Yeah.
That's at least taking advantage of the effect.
right. So adding just a little bit of extra depth of field, not really worth it to me.
It didn't enhance the film at all.
It didn't add to the movie.
No.
And that's the thing. Like,
And it also costs more money too.
yeah. So like, if you're gonna use a 3D movie, at least make it add to the film, not just be like, oh, and it looks a little prettier.
Yeah.
Make it add to it. Make it add to
I'm
the
hoping
effect.
with Green Lantern that they do take advantage of that because there's a lot to do there.
Mm-hmm.
With the different, like the one part where he makes the Gatling gun, and they throw fists and stuff like that. That'd be neat to see in 3D and come out at you. But other than that, Thor was good. Good action, good visuals. And I mean, realistically, even if we didn't like all the characters, there was at least good acting in it. You got good character, good story, good visuals, good action, good acting. Really can't go wrong.
That's why I give this rating a good.
Yes, it's good. Whoever listens to this podcast, if he be worthy, shall hear an awesome podcast.
Freaks out.
Freaks out. The content of the Freakacast is copyright to Andrew Felson and Matthew Puetz. All characters belong to their respective owners. A full list of music used will be provided on the website. This podcast is for entertainment use only. Copyright 2011.
Freaks in!